Paul has some issues with the church in Galatia. You might even say that Paul has a bone to pick with them. Most of Paul's letters begin with wonderful, flowery greetings. I thank my God every time I remember you, from Philippians. I thank my God always for you because of the grace God has been given you in Jesus Christ, from 1 Corinthians. Paul is typically thankful for his churches and the opportunity to communicate with them. But this letter to the Galatians is a bit of a different story. Paul begins with, this letter is from Paul, who is given authority from God and not from any human. And he almost immediately moves into, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you in the grace of Christ, and that you are turning to a different gospel. Or, if you translate this phrase directly from the Greek, what on earth are you doing over there? Paul skips the niceties and moves right into the nitty-gritty. No pleasant southern small talk to be found here. You see, it has come to Paul's attention that the members of the church which he planted in Galatia have succumbed to the teachings of some other Jewish Christians. They claim that it is necessary for Gentiles to first become Jews before they can become Christians. For Christ said, salvation begins with the Jews. The primary mode of this transformation would be the act of circumcision. This was a big question in the early church. Did Gentile converts need to be circumcised? Paul vehemently states that no, they do not. In fact, he says that to require Gentiles to do this is a movement away from the gospel which he spreads. Now, this may seem like a bit of an overreaction. Why does Paul care so much? But Paul cares because this is an example of humans putting a condition upon the saving grace of Jesus Christ, attaching a prerequisite to the gospel. For Paul, this is degrading the very heart of the gospel. So Paul puts pen to paper to admonish the Galatian Christians, to tell them this thing you're doing, this requirement you're adapting, that is not Christian. That is not in line with the gospel. I've enjoyed teaching our high school Sunday class this semester. I've been cooking the youth waffles every Sunday morning. One of them pointed out that it seemed that I was bribing them to come by making waffles. I said, no, it doesn't just seem that way, it is that way. I'm not ashamed to admit a little waffle coercion. A couple of times this semester we have discussed what it means to be Christian and how we react when we witness someone not behaving in the way we imagine Christians should behave. One of my students invariably speaks up to voice a concern that we should not be in a place of judgment as Christians. We should not be the ones to tell another person that they are not acting Christian. It's a fair point. It's a dangerous place to put ourselves in the place of judgment. And it's a dangerous responsibility to label another person's actions as Christian or not Christian. I love it when this student brings up this issue because, like so many faith questions or so many ethical questions, there is no easy answer. What gospel is the gospel of Christ? And what does that gospel look like? I always find myself, for some strange reason, challenging her, playing devil's advocate. But what about the role that the church played in the civil rights movement? Where would we be today if the church never took on the responsibility of speaking truth to power? Or what about Paul in the letter to the Galatians? He very clearly is telling the Galatians that they're not doing something that they are supposed to be doing. In fact, they're doing something they're not supposed to do. This whole letter is a process of one Christian calling out another group of Christians for non-Christian behavior. part of the reason I love this is because there's no easy answer. What is the gospel of Jesus Christ? And what does it look like to live out that gospel? I've noticed a trend in recent years. You may have seen some of these. There are books that are called The Gospel According to ... I bought one a long time ago. It was called The Gospel According to Tolkien, the author of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think I might also have The Gospel According to C.S. Lewis. Both of these seemed like reasonable purchases to me, but then I noticed that these deep-thinking authors were not the only ones who apparently wanted their own interpretation of the gospel. Some of the other newer derivations are The Gospel According to Harry Potter, The Gospel According to Disney, and The Gospel According to Coco Chanel, which I think would be an interesting read. These began to come across as a bit bizarre to me, but is it really that far off from our experience in the world? If we think about gospels in the broad sense, we come across other versions of the gospel all the time. The gospel according to this leader or that teacher or this preacher. This ideal, the gospel according to this value. We encounter other kinds of gospels with other messages. The gospel of Apple, the newest and best technology out there, as long as you replace it every few weeks. The fast food gospel, good food fast, as long as you pay more attention to the fast part. Not all of these gospels are bad gospels. The gospel of America, a land of freedom and equality, is a very good gospel, and it is a gospel for which many people have sacrificed their lives, a gospel which rings particularly loud this weekend. But many of the gospels we see in the world around us are gospels that we create. The gospel of power. Do what you can to get ahead, no matter what the cost. The gospel of success. Get as much money as you can so you can have as much stuff as you want. The gospel of status. Make sure you look like you have your life together, even if it is falling apart at the seams. And many gospels are out there that threaten to destroy us. The gospel of guilt, the gospel of shame, the gospel of death. There are so many gospels out there vying for our attention. It's no wonder the gospel of Jesus Christ gets drowned out. But, as Paul puts it, there really is only one gospel. After all, the word gospel means good news. And we cannot clearly call guilt good news, or shame good news, or death good news. And many of our other human gospels aren't truly good news either. The only good news gospel, the only non-human made, truly good news gospel is that of Jesus Christ. This is the gospel by which we are freed. This is the truth which sets us free. That is the good news which Jesus calls us to share with the world, which we are compelled to share with the world. But so often, it is easier for us to spread some other gospel, because those human gospels are so much easier for us to preach. So how do we set aside these non-gospels? How do we distinguish between them, and how do we speak about the real good news? I think part of the reason it's tough for us to talk to other people about the gospel is because we don't really know how to. We don't always know the right words to talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Which is why seminary professor and evangelist John Vest talks about the Christian elevator speech. He says that every Christian should have an elevator speech, a speech that they can give in the time that it takes to ride an elevator about why they are Christian. He promotes this as a way to think about evangelism. But I think it's also a way to think about what the gospel really means to us, why the gospel is life-changing for us. It's a way for us to think about what the good news of Jesus Christ truly looks like, why it's so compelling. What would your elevator speech look like? If you had 30 seconds to tell someone why you're a Christian, what would you say? On a further note, what would your elevator speech be like for being Presbyterian? How would you talk about being Presbyterian in just 30 seconds? I spent some time thinking about this with Elizabeth while we were on a continuing education trip recently. We had just finished listening to a speaker from the denomination in Louisville, and I realized that what he had spoken about gave me the language for my Presbyterian elevator speech that I'd never had before. His perspective is that the Christian life, and specifically the Presbyterian life, can be summed up by two words: grace and gratitude. Wherever Gina Martin is right now, she's probably doing a little happy dance, because grace and gratitude have been the theme that we have been exploring with our children over the past year. These two concepts, grace, the unearned gift of forgiveness which God has given, and gratitude, the only reasonable response that a Christian can have to such a gift, and the mindset which frames our entire life. These are the foundations of being Presbyterian. We place our deepest trust and our deepest commitment in the truth of the gospel, that God's grace is for all people. And knowing this, and being humbled by this amazing fact, the only way that we can respond to such an unwarranted gift is with gratitude. This is how we frame the Christian life, a life in need of grace, reflecting grace, demonstrated by gratitude. A gospel which is the true gospel is the one that reflects God's grace, one that reflects God's love, not just in the abstract, but in the concrete as well. That means that attaching conditions like circumcision or a certain identity or status or any of our other human identifiers does not reflect the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because not only does gospel mean good news, but gospel requires our deepest level of commitment. Sure, we may be committed to many things in this world, but the thing that deserves our deepest commitment is the gospel of Jesus Christ. While we may appreciate those other gospels, this is the gospel that deserves our time and attention. This is the gospel that deserves all of us. Knowing that the heart of the gospel is grace, we can frame the true gospel. This is how my youth can bear witness to what it truly means to be a Christian, by showing love as a grateful response to God's grace. Any gospel that doesn't represent that grace and doesn't cause a sense of gratitude is not a gospel that deserves our deepest commitment. This deep commitment to the good news of Christ is what makes one Christian. So true do the words of the hymnist ring: they will know we are Christians by our love. Amen.